Amiga, do you ever feel caught between two worlds? You cherish your cultural background, but sometimes it clashes with the realities of raising a family in modern America. You might feel pressured to fulfill traditional expectations, yet you crave a life that allows you to be your true, authentic self. If you're a Latina mom nodding your head right now, I see you, and I get it. Balanced Motherhood is more than your average mommy coaching program. It's a supportive comunidad designed specifically for you. I understand the unique challenges you face navigating between generations and culturas while forging your own path as a mama. Stop feeling like you have to choose between your roots and your future. Balanced Motherhood empowers you to create a life that celebrates your heritage, embraces your motherhood journey, and prioritizes your own happiness. Spots are limited. Don't miss out on this opportunity to connect with a supportive community and create a more balanced life. Visit the link in the show notes to join the waitlist for the next Balanced Motherhood cohort. I can't wait to meet you. You're listening to the Viva la Mami podcast, a podcast about all things motherhood. I'm your host, Jessica Cuevas. I am a mother of one on a mission to redefine the meaning of motherhood as a first-generation, bilingual, and bicultural Latina mommy. Regardless if we feel like a failure from time to time, or if we succeeded with the little things in our motherhood journey, it is important to celebrate all of these experiences as madres. So, bring your cafecito as I invite you to be a part of this space and create raw and honest conversations about the exciting and challenging parts of being a mommy. Ahora, vámonos. Hola, hola, amiga. Today we have Gisela Rodriguez, who is mi prima / tía, whichever way you want to define it, but basically she is a prima hermana of my mom, although she's a couple years younger than me. But I had the pleasure of interviewing her not too long ago about her experience as a NICU mom. She is a mommy of a 15-month-old at the time of this recording, and she walks us through her experience, just kind of like the unexpected experiences that a mommy goes through having a child prematurely. At only 30 weeks pregnant, she delivered her baby. And so that's something that a lot of mommies don't ever think about. And I really enjoyed having this conversation with her because not only does she walk us through her experience during the last weeks of her pregnancy, but also how she leaned in for support and how she built this village and community of family members and staff at the NICU. And so I really enjoyed this conversation, but for anyone listening out there, if this information is triggering or if you haven't yet coped with having a premature baby or having a NICU baby, just trigger warning. If you don't feel comfortable, please, you can skip this episode. Otherwise, feel free to listen. Again, this was a really good conversation that I had with her, and I hope that this can make meaning into understanding the nuances that happens to many parents who have a child that was born prematurely and what their lived experiences were in the NICU. So without further ado, here is my conversation with mi prima, Gisela Rodriguez. Hola, Gisela, ¿cómo estás?
Hello. Good. How are you?
Good. It's so good to see you.
Too.
Yeah,
It's been a long time.
Yeah, it has been a long time. I know that my mom went over to y'all like maybe 2 weeks ago or something for your mom's birthday.
Yes. A week or two ago.
A week or two ago. Yeah, I feel
Yeah.
like a month ago. But yeah, so for our listeners, Gisela and I are cousins, or no, like my mom and
Technically,
your mom.
Your mom and I are first cousins.
Okay, yes. So
But technically we're like tia and sobrina.
Yeah. But we grew up together and we're kind of like a couple years apart from each other. I'm a little older.
Yeah.
But yeah, we would definitely go to Wisconsin many times and we would stay over.
Oh my God.
Those were the good times.
Remember your dad bringing Dunkin' Donuts every morning in Wednesday?
Yeah. And we would have Topper's Pizza.
Oh my
I
God,
still
yeah.
remember that. Yeah. The Hawaiian pizza.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's good to connect with you again because now, which is interesting, right? Like back then we would talk about telenovelas and
Oh, my
act like
God.
them, like soñadoras, and
I
now
was
it's
going to
like,
say,
yeah.
or
And
amigas
now,
iguales,
yeah,
or,
yeah, that's right.
yeah,
But
yeah.
now we're talking about motherhood.
Oh, my
So,
God. I know.
yeah, which is nuts. So, yeah, so can you tell me a little bit more about yourself, like where you grew up, your family, and what do you currently do?
So, I mean, I was born in Mexico, but pretty much I was, came here when I was 4 years old. So pretty much I don't really remember really anything from over there. I grew up in Whitewater, Wisconsin, pretty much until I was 20, like 3 years old. And then I got married, moved to, a different town, and then we bought a house, and now I live in Beloit, Wisconsin, I guess full-time medical assistant at an OBGYN office. So I've been there for like 6.5 years already. So full-time job, full-time mom, full-time wife, everything at once.
I know. If only we can get paid for the other
Oh
jobs
my
we have,
God.
right?
It's like my day off is like, wait, that was not a day off. It
I
was
know.
like everything you can't do during the week is, your day off. But
Yes. Yes.
those things never stop.
Yeah. They don't.
Pretty much, yeah. I mean, that's kind of it, just lots of work. That's
Yeah.
about it.
Yeah. No, that's great. And you have a daughter, ¿verdad? ¿Y
Yeah.
cuánto ya tiene?
She's 15 months.
Oh my gosh.
Yes. You know,
Wow, time flies.
and yes. So now she's a
Yeah.
little rebel.
Yeah. Yeah, they definitely, I'm sure that she obviously has her personality and
Oh my God. Yes.
toddlerhood is real. Like,
Oh my God. And I'm like,
yeah.
what's worse? Like when they're like newborns, or like when now she can walk,
Yep, yep. It's gonna be a challenge. Like D, he's ¿cuánto tiene? Well, he's gonna be 22 months, so he's close
Yeah.
to 2 years, and he's in that, spike of like toddlerhood. Like the other day,
Yeah.
I love taking him to Target, and he loves going to Target. Like that, he knows that it's my favorite store.
Yeah.
And he wanted to walk around the store, and I'm like, no, no puedes
Oh
estar
my
aquí,
God. Yeah.
like we have to put you in the cart. And he did a tantrum, and it was like the first time that he cried out in public like that. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is real. And I remember I would criticize other moms like just letting their kids cry.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm like, oh snap, this is
You're like, what do I
getting
do?
yeah, yeah. So yeah, it's real, but it's also fun because
Yeah.
not only do they have a personality, pero también like they interact with you, they communicate with
Mhm.
you. They're doing kind of things independently too. So it kind of leaves you just like to observe them and
Mhm.
kind of let them do their own things. So it's
Yeah,
nice. Yeah.
it is.
Yeah. So I personally know your story.
Mhm.
About, your pregnancy and childbirth, but would you be willing to share with our listeners about your experience having a premature baby in the NICU?
Yeah. So, it's like, where do you start? So pretty much my due date was September of 2021. I
Mm-hmm.
delivered in July of 2021. I mean, everything was, going normal, planned pregnancy, everything's fine. Not up until my like 20, I was maybe like 22 weeks or so, that like she was starting to measure a little bit smaller, which was, initially it's like, okay, it's fine. And then I was probably like 26 weeks or so, somewhere around there. And my doctor's like, you're measuring like at 23 weeks, give or take.
Interesting.
So she's like, let's do an ultrasound. Also, something, I don't know if you've ever heard of it, it's called Dopplers. So pretty much it's like an ultrasound, and they measure, the kind of like the flow between your umbilical cord and the placenta. And, that was like, the numbers were a little bit elevated, which means like, the flow is there, but it's just not where it should be. But she's like, it's still okay. I was like, all right. And then she's like, okay, I'm going to send you to the maternal fetal medicine, which are the high risk pregnancy doctors in Rockford. And then I went there, and then they're like, well, you are measuring, your baby's measuring really small. So we want to see you twice a week. And I was like, oh gosh, how am I going to do this? I live like 20 minutes away from Rockford. So it's really not that bad, but I was more like, okay, how is this going to work out with work? Like I work full time. Like, I was already stressing out, how is this going to work out? But fortunately, I work at an OBGYN office, so we are connected with Rockford. So we send our patients there, all the time. So, my doctor's like, okay, you can see them once a week and you can see us once a week. I was like, all right, that kind of works out. So, I started seeing them, they did what's like the non-stress test, which, they monitor the baby ultrasound with. So I would see them once a week and then my doctor once a week. And then I saw them one week and then the next week, they're like, your Dopplers are looking even more elevated, which is not very good. So they decided to give me a steroid shot to help the baby, with the lung development for the baby, just in case she came early, which at that point, they're like, probably going to have early delivery. But at that point, it's like, we're just going to monitor, So they gave me a steroid shot. The next day at my job, they gave me the next dose because it has to be 24 hours. And that was like on maybe like a Wednesday or something or Tuesday. And then that week, I had an appointment with Rockford because I was seeing them once a week. So then I was like, that day I woke up in the morning and I was like, something is just like wrong. I couldn't sleep the whole night, not because I was uncomfortable. It was just insomnia. Like I just could not sleep. And then I remember Christian's like, go to sleep. And I'm like, I can't, like, just something, like, I just cannot fall asleep. So I finally, like, maybe like 3 a.m, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to go to the couch, watch some TV, see if I can fall asleep, And then like at 6 a.m, I wake up and I was just super nauseous. And I was like, this is so weird because I've never been nauseous, like not even in the beginning of the pregnancy,
Oh, yeah.
I was like, this is weird, and then I wake up, from the couch and I just started shaking. Like my hands would not stop. My legs would just like not stop shaking. And I was like, this is super weird, you know? And then like at that point, I'm like, I didn't feel her move really at all, which she was so small that I never really felt her move much, I think that's one of the things also, like, I feel like I didn't get a full experience of pregnancy. Like, I don't really know what it was to like, oh my God, the baby moved, or, those later pregnancy things, which, at one point it could be like, okay, good, you didn't experience all of that. But then, I kind of feel like I missed out on, I didn't never felt her move, or saw any movement in my belly, type of thing.
Yeah.
But kind of going back, that day I called labor and delivery and I'm like, I don't know, I just feel like something is off, So I'm like, okay, just come in. And that was like at my regular doctor's, office. So literally, I remember I got to the lobby there. She starts moving. I don't feel nauseous. I feel like nothing ever happened. And I was like, I think I'm just going to go home. Like, no, are you like sure? And I'm like, no. I'm like, I'm totally sure, like I have an appointment later today at 11 a.m. with Rockford. Like, I really think I'm fine. And, like we talk to labor and delivery all the time. So they're like, no, like you should really stay, And I'm like, no, I'm fine,
Yeah.
I was like, it's just, new mom, you don't know what to expect or something.
Right.
I think I'm okay. I'll just go home, kind of embarrassed. Like, oh my God, I just like, I got here and then like nothing's wrong, So then, I just came back home and then, Christian's like, do I go with you to Rockford? I'm like, no, just go home. I mean, go to work, it's fine. I'm just going to go for an ultrasound. He's like, no, you know what? He's like, I'll just go to work later. I'll go with you to your appointment to Rockford. So then I go to Rockford, to my regular appointment. And then, they start doing my fetal monitor test and, that was fine. And then they started doing my ultrasound and then it was just like longer and longer. And the girl just kept scanning and scanning. And I, like from having that OB experience, I told her, are you doing what's called a biophysical profile, which pretty much just checks like the breathing of the baby, how many times do they move, all that kind of stuff. So she's like, yeah. And, they can't really tell you much, but like it's that having that experience, I'm like, I kind of know what you're doing.
You knew. Yeah.
Yeah. So she's like, yeah, I'm doing a biophysical profile. And I'm like, okay, And then like she didn't even finish doing her ultrasound and the doctor comes in. So she's like, Miss Rodriguez. She's like, oh, things are not looking good. And I'm like, oh my God, like what is going on? Like I was super scared, And she's like, well, in the beginning, your Dopplers were elevated, which was fine. She's like, but now they're intermittently absent, which means like the flow is there and then it stops. And then it continues and then it stops. So, that's not good. So she's like, I'm like, okay, so I'm like, now what, She's like, well, we're going to have to leave you in the hospital for a couple days, observe things, She's like, because it could go back to being normal, your Dopplers. And I was like, okay. So I'm like freaking out, calling work, like, I can't go to work tomorrow. I don't even know when I'm going to go back to work, So she's like, if your Dopplers go back to normal, she's like, I'm comfortable enough with you going back to work like on Monday or Tuesday. And then, life continues. She's like, but you're probably not going to go past 37 weeks. Like, you're going to have to be induced at 37. She's like, but if your Dopplers are obviously absent, then you need to deliver instantly. Or if they kind of stay the same, you have to stay in the hospital until you deliver. And I was like, oh my God, like,
Wow.
what the heck, So, they're like, okay, go over to labor and delivery. And, I go over there and the first thing they check is my blood pressure. And it's like sky high. And they had just checked it like when I got there, it was a little bit higher than my normal, but it wasn't considered high. So I remember I get there and it's like 189 over like 110. And I just kept telling them, I'm like, no, it's because I'm nervous. You guys are obviously, like telling me to go over here. I'm super nervous. So they're like, okay, just relax. We'll recheck it again. And then like, obviously the more I was there, the more nervous I was getting, and they just kept telling me, just trying to relax, just trying to relax. I even remember like I put in my phone, like relaxing music. I had them turn the lights off. I was like trying to like get in my zone of like, just relax, Didn't work. And they're like, we're going to have to start an IV and we're going to have to start giving you medication to, lower your blood pressure. Did nothing. So then I was like freaking out even more, So I'm like, okay, I'm like calling my mom, like, I don't know what's happening. Like, I don't know what's going on. Christian's like freaking out, And then finally after like, I don't know, they probably monitored my blood pressure for a couple hours. And then the neonatal doctor comes in and she's like, all right, so we're going to deliver a 30-weeker. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, what? And I'm like, no, I'm just here for observation. She's like, no, like you're delivering today or tomorrow. And I'm like, I was just mind blown. Like, what are you talking about? Like, no, you got this wrong. Like, I'm just here for observation. She's like, no. So she starts telling me everything. Like, okay, this is what happens when you deliver a 30-weeker. They're going to be probably intubated, like, you're not going to be able to hold them. You're not like nothing, And I was like, oh my God, what is, and then, and then I'm like, can you like give me like a moment here? I literally told her, I'm like, I need a moment to like process this, And then they were like gonna recheck my blood pressure. I'm like, no, like it's gonna be even probably higher right now that you're, telling me all this.
Yeah.
And then, she's like, all right, we'll give you a moment, whatever. And then the OB doctor that was the hospitalist there, she comes in and she's like, do you want a vaginal delivery or do you want a C-section? I'm like, lady, I don't even know. Like, I don't even know what my options are. Like, I don't even know what's the safest. I don't know what I should do. Like, I don't know, So luckily I was able to call my doctor. Obviously she can't deliver me. She can't tell me what to do, But I was just like, oh my God, like this is going on, And she's like, well, like kind of whatever they tell you, type of thing. So the doctor there, she checked me and I was actually already a centimeter dilated and my cervix was already soft. So she's like, you're good to go for a vaginal delivery if you want to. And I was like, is that going to like stress the baby out? Like I had, first time mom, like, I don't even know. I've never had any experience of this, She's like, no, nothing's going to be stressing out the baby. If you want to go for vaginal delivery, then we'll just induce you. And I was like, I guess I'll give it a try. I'm like, I didn't want to jump right into a C-section, if I didn't have to.
Right.
But then at the same time, I was like, 30-weeker, like, I just didn't know what to expect, It helped me a little bit that I had that OB experience because I work there and I kind of already know what happens. I don't work in labor and delivery, but I work in the OBGYN clinic. So finally, they started inducing me, they break my water and then, everything was fine. And then, at the end, they're like, well, as long as your blood pressure doesn't like spike up again, then you can deliver this baby. And then the next day, like at 5 p.m., I delivered her. And it was, it was like, it was such a like fast thing, I guess, that like, I guess in any delivery, regardless, like things just at the last minute just happen so fast.
Yeah.
You don't even know what happens. But I remember like, I mean, I didn't even dilate to 10 because she was so small.
Mm.
I probably got to like 8 centimeters and like I knew that she had to come out.
Yeah.
So they're like, well, you're only 8, but like she's low enough where you can just. I probably pushed for like 5 minutes. Like that was it. Like she was tiny. I remember like she came out and like I had zero emotion. Like I didn't say anything. I didn't like I guess it was just the shocker of like just seeing her so small. Like Christian didn't even get to cut the umbilical cord, like nothing. She was out. I just remember them like holding her up. They took her. Like 20 people were in the room from the NICU team. They took her and like I do remember that when she was born, she started crying. I'm like, okay, they're like, okay, she started crying, like she does not have to be intubated. So thankfully, she wasn't intubated. But they were like, it's not very common because most 30 weekers like have to be intubated because they just don't cry. So I do remember that. They're like, all right, she's crying, like she's not gonna be intubated. So I was like, oh my God, like so relieved.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I just remember like, they couldn't put her in like a bag, which she reminded me of like the turkey when you put them in a bag. But I mean, like I said, I don't even know what happened, because that Christian was like, what do I do? Like, do I stay with you or do I go with the baby? Because she had to go to a different floor. And I'm like, just go with the baby. I'm like, we're gonna all leave. Just, I don't go with the baby. So he's like, are you sure? He's like, he didn't know what to do either. So he went to the other floor, was with the baby and stuff. But I mean, I just stayed there with the nurses. I'm like, all right, like, I don't know what's going on. What's happening. They're like, no, it's fine. They're taking care of the baby. It was like such a scary, like, it was just, she was 2 pounds, 5 ounces, so she was tiny, tiny, tiny,
Yeah.
tiny. But it was very scary. I delivered her on a Friday. I didn't actually get to see her until Sunday, like 11 p.m.
Wow.
So that was very frustrating, like, because they had me on magnesium. So it makes you like, it doesn't make you drowsy, but like you don't have full control of like your body in a way. So like I couldn't get up to the bathroom by myself. I remember like my mom came afterwards and like I was eating and I was like, am I even chewing my food? Like it makes you feel like drowsy, like it's not you. Like everything was just so weird. Like the way it makes you feel your body hurt, like it was weird. But when you're on magnesium, they can't let you hold the baby because you don't, your muscle, you don't have control of your muscles.
Yeah.
So that's why they couldn't let me go see her. So I remember Christian was FaceTiming me, from the other floor, and then that's how I got to see the baby, But that was probably the hardest thing. With like, you don't know what's going on, you don't know where your baby's at, how is she doing, So Christian got to see all that, I didn't, but I guess he had like that other experience, of seeing the baby, really first before me, in a way,
Yeah.
But,
He probably, like you felt like he got to bond with her first.
Yeah.
Then you.
Because I was like, it took me days to see her. And I mean, even like while I was in my floor, he went over there to see her all the time, So that was a little, like I said, I feel like I never really got a full pregnancy normal experience, since the beginning. Everything was just super just weird.
Yeah. And how did you, like, now that you're talking about this, and I'm sure that you have reflected on that experience, like, how did you cope with that, with having a baby in such an unexpected time, right? A premature baby, not getting to like, have the skin to skin kind of experience for the first hour or whatever, how have you coped, I guess, if you have?
And my mom tells me this all the time. She's like, I feel like you were very emotionless for a long time. She's like, maybe I didn't realize it, other than my mom telling me like, months later, she's like, I didn't really feel like you like, not like, como que, like, I didn't feel like I was a mom, kind of in a way, you know,
Mm,
like she's like, you didn't really say anything, you didn't really say how you felt. And I feel like I was just still in such a shock. Like,
mhm.
I just couldn't believe what happened, you know? And in a way, like, that I think about it now, I feel like it's kind of like not jealous of those things, but like I said, I still feel like I never got that real full experience, you know, like,
Yeah.
so that was probably like, it took me a while to actually like, okay, like I am a mom, you know, type of thing. Cause like,
Mhm.
you know, even I remember leaving the hospital like 5 days later, you know, cause my blood pressure was so high. I remember we left and like we got to the garage and like Christian and I just like started bawling, you know, cause like you just had a baby and you're not home with your baby, you know, like, and it was just super weird. Like, okay, I would go to the hospital. Yes, I'm a mom. I have a baby. And then I would leave the hospital and I'm like, okay, I'm back to the same as before I had a baby, you know, at home. Like,
Mhm.
you don't have a baby at home, but you're a mom, you know, like it's just very weird, you know.
Yeah.
And I feel like I said, it took me a long time to kind of like get that feeling of like, okay, like you are a mom type of thing, you know, you are a parent. So that
Yeah,
was
and
definitely,
yeah, and I'm sure that it's in a way like in addition to like that shock and kind of like that resentment in a
hmm
way that you have about, not having a normal kind of childbirth experience, pero
hmm
también it's almost as if like you're in the adrenaline, right? Like
yeah,
you have to kind of be in this moment to make
hmm
sure that your baby is well, that you are
hmm
well. And it's almost like you let those feelings not even get to you yet.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
That's,
it was, it's, sometimes I'm still like, wait, I have a child? Like, then she starts crying and I'm like, well, yeah, I have a child,
yeah, you definitely do. That's a big reminder,
you
especially
know?
once, she's like 18 months plus.
Oh my God, yeah.
Yeah,
But
yeah. So how long was she in the hospital, and can you kind of tell us a little bit about that experience? Kind
yeah,
of you mentioned, you were going back and forth
yeah.
between
So,
home and stuff.
so like obviously, you know, she stayed there, and you know, I had the first 6 weeks off, you know, totally off work, but still like, you know, we would go to the NICU every single day. You know, we were there for a couple hours, and then it was hard because then you're like, do I stay and sleep in the hospital? Do I come back home? You know, I tried staying there, but honestly, like, I didn't know what was worse, like
Mm.
going home to like I'm not home with my child to being in the hospital, hearing the alarms go off all night, all day, the nurses coming in multiple times. Like, I was like, you know what? Like, I can't do this. Like, it's way too stressful. Like, in a way, like, I felt bad. Like, should I be staying in the hospital with my child 24/7? You know, you just don't know what to do, you know? And I told Christian, I was like, I can't do it. Like, I really cannot. Like, I'm not resting. Like, it's not like I'm sleeping here anyways because, you know, like I said, alarms are going off. The nurses are coming in. She's crying, you know, this and that. So I was just like, you know what? I can't. We would just go, you know, every day, sometimes twice a day to the NICU. I did have the opportunity. They did have a camera. So I could watch her live, which, you know, sometimes was like, oh, it could have been worse because like sometimes I would watch her and like she's crying and I'm like, oh, my child's crying and I'm not there, you know, or like, how long has she been crying for, you know, or oh my God, you know, is she hurting, you know, this and that. So that was a little, I would try sometimes avoid going on the camera too much because like I said, sometimes like, oh, she's crying and nobody's there, you know, type of thing. But you know, once my 6 weeks were over, I was like, okay, well now do I go back to work? Do I not go to work? Because like at that point, like we didn't know how long she was gonna be there for, which we know she was gonna be there long term, but we just didn't know how long. So I was like, you know, I don't know what to do. Like I was just I was just so like confused and like what's the right thing to do? What's not the right thing to do, you know? So I decided to work half days. So I would go work in the mornings and then I would go home, shower, and then go straight to the NICU. And between all that, it's pumping, you know,
Yeah.
so I didn't really get much milk supply. One, because, you know, obviously you just your body wasn't even ready
Mhm.
start pumping milk, And two, I just think my body I just didn't produce a lot of milk. So, but I did have the opportunity to pump some, and then I would freeze it and then take it to the NICU. Because even in the NICU, like she would get like, I remember her very first feeding was like 2 milliliters.
Yeah.
So it's like the tiny little amount, So for me, it was like perfect because I'm like, okay, I'm not really getting much, but it's enough for her.
Right.
And obviously, they had to do a preemie formula with my breast milk because it wasn't, regardless of how much milk I had, she needed the extra calories. But yeah, it was really hard, like, going to work, going to the NICU, coming back home at midnight, doing it all over again, pumping. And then, it was the busiest time of the season for Christian. So that was super stressful on her too. So then I worked half days until the baby came home. And then once she came home, I only had a couple weeks left of my maternity leave. So I was fortunate enough to I had to request an extension. Because at that point, I think I only had like 5 weeks left of my maternity leave. And I'm like, what am I going to do 5 weeks with a preemie home?
Right.
So I did take some extra time. So I was very lucky about that. But it was very, very stressful. It was, and then with COVID and like at that point, you could only have 2 additional people come in to see her. Before COVID, you could have up to 5. Up to 5 people to go and see the baby without the parents being there. And during the whole COVID thing, only 2 people. So then it was like, okay, which 2 people do we choose? Type of thing. So, we ended up choosing, my mom and his mom. So, they were there as much as they could to go see the baby. But it was hard, on everybody else because everybody wanted to see the baby. And, we did a lot of FaceTiming. So that was helpful.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was very, very stressful trying to balance, life, home, work. What's the right thing to do? Is it wrong? Is it right? Type of thing.
Right.
So
yeah.
It was hard.
Oh my gosh. I can even imagine. I hope this isn't triggering for you right
No.
now, but I think thank you for sharing about your experience overall. We have these thoughts and even upbringing and, just we think that once we become pregnant, we think that everything's going to be
Fine.
the way that, like normal or whatever.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for everyone to be just mindful that it can happen to you,
To anybody,
¿verdad?
Yeah.
And so I think that you sharing, kind of like your experience can help many mommies who are either expecting or who had a similar experience, because even like in our community as Latinos, like I feel like there isn't much conversation about this or just like talking about the, people's experiences on what it was like. And the fact that you were able to manage, your job, going to the hospital, obviously doing household related things, and making sure that your husband is also well. Like, I think it's a lot of load that you carry.
Oh, yeah.
You know? Yeah. Considering all of that, what kind of support or type of support did you receive once, she was born? Like, did you get support from family or staff at the hospital or different support groups?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I mean, obviously, like our family, my parents, siblings, his family, they were all worried, calling us all the time, how's the baby doing? Like I said, we did a lot of FaceTime with a lot of family members because, they were like, oh my God, we want to see the baby, this and that, and so we would do a lot of FaceTime at the hospital. Even our neighbor, oh my God, like I'm like, this lady deserves like the neighbor award, She would like, will bring us food like twice a week. Like, oh my God, this lady, I'm like, gosh, like, bless her, like, because I mean, like I said, there were so many times where like, okay, like we're eating on the way to the hospital, like it's either I eat at home and spend less time with her at the hospital or eat on the way to the hospital. So I would say like 90% of the time we would eat on our way to the hospital, because like I said, we got home from work, showered, go, it was like, like I said, our neighbor would always bring us food and like, we're eating on the way to the hospital, whether it was fast food or, food that we had, my mom always cooked a lot of food and she brought us food. Christian's mom too, like everybody helped us out a lot that way. With food was the biggest thing, like cooking time, that was like the time saver, really. you know, she don't really think about food, you know.
Right.
But in reality, it's like, you know, I didn't have a lot of time to be cooking, this, doing that. So that was extremely helpful from everybody from the hospital. I mean, they, you know, were always like, you know, whatever you need, you know. I mean, even at the hospital, they had like, you know, breast pumps there if you didn't have one, you know, because not everybody can get one. You could shower there, you could sleep there, you know, they had toiletries there, you know, and sometimes they had like people would donate like food or snacks. And we did that actually a couple times. We took pizza in for like parents and we took pizza for staff. We did that multiple times. Even like snacks from like Sam's Club. I know my mom bought some for a couple times and we would just take boxes of snacks and left them there at the, you know, at the parents, you know, lobby. My brother donated like, I think like 30 like blankets for the incubators because even when we were there, like sometimes it'd be like, okay, like we're really low on like the little blankets that they would wrap their like little colchoncito with. So my brother donated like 30 of those little blankets for the incubator. But it's not till you're there that you kind of realize sometimes like you're fortunate when other parents you don't even know if they have money to eat. Do they not? You know, that's why you know we took pizza so many times. You know, like because you could see people there like, oh my god, somebody brought in pizza. You know, like you know, it's late at night. You know, cafeteria is not open. Like I said, sometimes you don't know what people are going through. Like, did they lose their job? Did they not? You know, I'm like, we were fortunate enough to like, okay, like we have food, we have a house, you know, we have a car to come and see the baby in. I'm like, but there was literally people there who I remember seeing, like, they wouldn't leave the hospital, you know, there's people that lived far away that couldn't leave. You know, it was either making a decision of I'm going back to wherever, like Madison or something, you know, and or staying at the hospital with the baby, you know. Like I said, we were close enough where we could do that every day, but you know, there was a ton of people there that probably couldn't do the same thing, you know. But they were all very, very supportive there, you know, staff, doctors, you know. They came and rounded on babies like 2 to 3 times a day. And like they were always like, okay, questions, you know, they were always very, you know, open to you asking, you know, questions, never, you know, like I said, as a first time mom, as a first time NICU experience, you know, we had a million questions every day, you know, but, and I called all the time too, you know, they were always like, if you ever want to call, you know, for updates, you know, go ahead. So I would call sometimes in the mornings, like, okay, like, they're like, okay, you know, we increased her feedings or, you know, she did this, she did that, you know, type of thing. So, and I always remember feeling like, oh my God, am I one of those people that like calls too much, you know? You know, like I remember one time, like I was watching her on the camera and she was crying because her little pacifier came out. And I remember feeling so embarrassed calling. And I was like, can you please go get her pacifier? Because like she wants her pacifier and she like came out of her mouth. And I'm she's like, oh yeah, don't worry about it. But yeah, they never made it, you know, we always felt comfortable.
That's good.
So I never felt like our questions weren't answered or nothing like that. So
yeah.
I was very happy with that.
Yeah, that's good. That's good because especially in our community, we tend to just like default to like these authoritative figures and then be okay with what we're told.
Whatever they say, yeah.
Yeah, and whatever they say, y no hacemos preguntas. So, and I'm glad that, I mean, not glad that this happened to you, right? But like at least you, like you mentioned, like you have had experience with other parents in your work. And even though, yes, it wasn't in a NICU setting or in a labor delivery setting, like you at least have had, you know, that kind of exposure, know what to ask or what to seek out for. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that was helpful too at the NICU because like I was like, you know, there's a lot of parents that might not even understand what's going on.
Yeah.
You know? So I know Christian sometimes would be like, what does that mean? You know, or like, so that, you know, so sometimes I would explain things to him. But it was very helpful to have that experience behind that, you know.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. And kind of going back on like just like your overall experience, did you ever feel like a sense of isolation with this? Like,
no, not really. I don't think I ever felt isolated or like felt, I don't even know what's the word. I don't know. I guess I just always was like, okay, you know, like having that medical, you know, background, like it made me feel more comfortable. You know, it was hard because like nobody could see the baby, you know, other than, you know, both of our moms. So in that aspect, it was a little bit hard, like I can't share it with many people, because nobody comes here type of thing. But I don't, luckily, I don't think we felt like isolated or anything like that. I think it was
Yeah.
just like, it was so new for everybody in our family and everything that they all had questions too.
Mhm.
Sometimes we had the answer, sometimes we didn't. But yeah, no, I don't think we ever really felt like isolated, like we couldn't ask anything, like we couldn't ask for any help type of thing. Cause I remember asking my mom all the time, I'm like, oh my God, can you like cook me this? Because like I just have some food in my fridge, not because I can't, not because I don't have money, but because I don't have the time. So we just felt like a lot of support from everybody, from our friends. Like friends also brought me food. That's a big, like I said, you don't think about food, but that's the biggest time saver.
Yeah, definitely adds a lot of the, your time, but also there's like this mental thing that you have to
Yeah.
like, kind of remind yourself. And it's also survival. Like you need
Yeah.
food in
Yeah.
order to live. So
Yeah.
yeah. No, that's good that you had community porque I think with this being your first time and
Mhm.
experience, I'm glad that you had the support system with you
Mhm.
and it gives you perspective. And it's even given me perspective that unfortunately there are so many families que no tienen,
Yeah.
familia or,
Yeah.
the resources. So thank you for
Yeah. I
sharing
think
that.
I thought a lot about, and I remember talking to Christian about this all the time. Like we would always say to each other, like, how does a single parent go through this?
Mm.
I'm like, it's two of us. And it was so hard. I'm like,
Mm.
how does a single parent with or without kids do it? You know, like emotionally, physically, like it was really hard, like I'm like, I can't imagine like a single parent going through this, you know, like,
Yeah.
I was like, we're fortunate, but I'm like, that always ran through the back of my mind. Like, how in the world does a single parent go through this?
Mm.
Especially if they have other kids. Like, if they don't have family around here, do they not have all the help? A lot of times, like I remember in the NICU actually, because out of the whole 2.5 months that she was there, we missed one day. That was it. And that day I was like, oh my God, like I'm such a bad mom, like type of thing. But they did her little kind of surprise, baby welcoming, I guess you would call it. And they were all like, just stay and relax here. And I was like, no, I gotta go see my baby. They're like, it's fine, you're just gonna miss one day, like you'll go back tomorrow, and I remember just like calling the hospital and I'm like, I can't go today. They're like, it's fine, like she's fine, they're like, you guys are actually one of the few parents that are here every single day, which
Mm.
I was like, oh, I thought all parents were here every single day, like at that moment, I was like, oh, I guess there aren't so many parents that go every single day. And, but, now I'm like, if I were to have another kid and I go through the same thing again, like, I don't even know if I would be able to go every single day. Now you have a child, like, who's going to watch this child for hours if you want to go to the NICU, or it's either he goes or I go, type of thing.
Yeah.
So that always makes me like wonder, like,
Yeah.
we were fortunate, but other people, like, I don't know, I don't
Yeah.
know what they're going through.
Yeah, and it's almost like, que no juzgar a la gente
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Because yeah, you're so right. Like you don't know their story. You don't know,
Yeah.
if they have difficulties or if they have another family to take care of.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. It gives perspective. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I did prepare some questions for you. And so I think when it comes to our identity, as Latinas,
Hmm.
and being surrounded with all of our, Mexican, Latino,
Yeah.
family members, like, did you ever kind of receive like weird advice or just like things that kind of made you feel uncomfortable or upset? I guess like what was the worst thing that you received from someone in response to, like having a premature baby?
You know, I think thankfully, I don't think really anything negative. I
Okay.
think it was more like the questions like, why did this happen? Like,
Mm.
pero por qué? ¿Qué pasó? ¿Por qué? Like I don't have that answer. Like, I don't know. Like, was it my body? Who knows? I mean, probably, but like, could I have controlled it? I don't know. Like, I
Yeah.
think it was just more of the, but why? But why did it happen? I'm like, I don't
Mm.
know why it happened. you know.
Mhm.
But, other than that, I think we were pretty, blessed and everything that I don't think we've really ever had like anything negative, from that situation.
Yeah.
Um, I think more like now, maybe even more like, you get advice from your mom, grandma, whatever. And then you hear like, you go on Google and you're like, no, but I shouldn't be doing that. Or like your pediatrician, like, no, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah. Yep.
So it's like, who do I listen to? Like, how do I like not hurt their feelings? Like, no, I shouldn't do that, or like, no, this is what we do now, or,
Right.
the whole, co-sleeping and, everything. Like, no, you should really sleep with your baby and, isn't that? And you're like, yeah, probably not, type
Right.
of thing. But I think it's just more of like running into that, like, who do you listen to? Some things is like, okay, like, I know that's not right, but like, how do I tell them? Or like, type of thing. So that I think this has been like harder. But like I said, it's probably just like now, not so much from like just the NICU, but
Yeah.
just as they're growing up,
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll always get that advice.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
Always. Pero no lo dicen con maldad
No, it's
or,
just what they, grew up with and
right, right.
yeah.
And it's an older generation, even though it's like 1 or 2 generations back. Pero
Yeah.
también, like, our moms grew up well, my mom technically grew up here, but she definitely was influenced a lot with like the traditional things.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so,
Yeah.
and like with your mom, like, it's a different culture, it's a different
Yeah.
country. Yeah. So there's a lot of clash there. Pero I think it's just depending on what you feel comfortable, what we both feel comfortable with in receiving that advice and, figure it out through the experts. I always go through like my pediatrician and, Google sometimes doesn't help either. So yeah, I think definitely leaning on to the professionals
Yeah.
for that. Yeah. But it's good that you didn't receive kind of like weird advice or kind of comments from people
Yeah. No,
about
we were
having a NICU
pretty,
baby. Yeah,
yeah, no, we
that's
were pretty
good.
fortunate, not
Yeah.
to run into those situations. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
And so, what would you advise people in our community when it comes to being a NICU mom?
Patience. Patience, first of all. I guess just kind of like being in the loop of things, like I said, I would call for updates all the time.
Mhm.
I guess having some sort of like knowledge about like, okay, like these things can happen, like I never in a million years thought that I was gonna go through that, Like I said, I would see it at work all the time with my patients, but like for me, I was like, never did it even cross my mind that I would go through that. So I guess just in general, like if you're pregnant, whatever, and you don't want to like think about everything that could happen to you, but like obviously make sure, you're going to all your appointments, just being in the loop of your pregnancy, asking the questions you gotta, ask. I know I did have somebody that I knew that I saw on Facebook that she also had a preemie baby. So, like I remember messaging her, and I was like, I know what you're going through, like always advocate for your baby. If you have any questions, make sure to answer, ask any questions. I'm like, don't feel afraid to ask questions. And I remember that specifically because I remember when the baby was in the NICU, I remember because, she had a little tape in her face from the oxygen and everything. And I remember at one point I saw like in the side of her cheek where she had the tape, it was getting a little red. And I remember telling the nurse, I'm like, I think it's looking a little red. And she's like, I think it's fine. She's like, but I'll keep an eye on it. And I remember that day she called me at night and she's like, just so you know, like her skin did blister under the tape. So she had to pull off the tape. And when she pulled off the tape, obviously, se le abrió.
Yeah.
And, it was she had to have an IV for a week because then she got cellulitis in her face. She got a horrible infection. So I just remember, like I told, the girl, I'm like, don't be afraid to advocate for your baby, to ask questions, to tell them what your concerns are, anything like that. So I guess kind of the biggest thing is don't be afraid to ask questions. Like I said, even like it's kind of intimidating when like 5 doctors coming around on your baby, like, everybody is rounding on these babies and, you feel like obviously their, knowledge is above you, but, I'm like, don't be afraid to, ask me questions.
Yeah. No, that's great. Thank you for sharing that because I think, yes, like there's all these medical professionals that are with your baby, your baby's being monitored 24/7 in the NICU. pero it's that mother intuition, ¿verdad? That you have that there's something odd or off, like definitely speak up about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because your intuition was literally saying like, oh, there's something wrong with my daughter's cheek.
Yeah.
Y mira lo que pasó.
Yeah. And I remember telling them afterwards, like, I wasn't mad at it. I was just remember like, I told her, type of thing. Like, I knew something was going to happen, type of thing. But I mean, it's nobody's fault. I mean, her skin was she had tape on her face for weeks, for months. I'm like, it was going to happen probably at any point, but eventually they had to like switch they had to get like all this special tape for her and like prep her skin before they applied all these tapes and things like that. But yeah, I remember telling her like, just don't be afraid to ask. Just whatever you're feeling, just ask or say really to the nurses,
Yeah, definitely speak up. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much. And I'm sure that many mommies will appreciate your tips, and it can also empower them también, to know that if something's off, they have a voice, they have, and I think I like how you brought it that it's, think about your baby, advocate for your baby, because it's true. Like they don't have a voice, like they're so vulnerable. They're, very sensitive, and only you yourself knows, you'll have that intuition or that feeling, that gut feeling that something is off, and then definitely speak up about it. Yeah.
I guess one other thing before I forget is probably one thing that changed, I think, once the baby was home, not so much from the hospital, but once she was home, is I got the abuelette sock. So it's like, it's a sock that goes in their little feet that monitors their oxygen level and their heart rate. I feel like was the biggest peace of mind I've ever had. And I don't know if it was like, honestly, like being so scared, probably from, in the hospital, she has a monitor on, like, I mean, they're checking her oxygen, they're checking her heartbeat. Like I remember multiple times when she was in the hospital, her heart rate would just drop, which is pretty normal for preemies. Because, their brain is not fully developed to signal, between their heart and their brain, that, okay, I should be breathing right now type of thing. So I don't know if it was just so much from being scared from hearing those alarms all the time. But I mean, just coming home, like we had that sock on her, and that was the biggest like peace of mind I could ever have, because it was, monitoring her heart rate, her oxygen level, more so because she was on oxygen probably until like 2 days before she came out of the hospital. So she was on long-term oxygen. If you're an anxious person, maybe not. Because you don't want to be like staring at that monitor 24/7. But it was a very big help.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks so much. All right, so now I'm going to shift over to my Viva la Mami motherhood questions that I ask all my guests. And so the first question is, what still surprises you about being a mommy?
Oh gosh, you never finish learning. Every day I'm like, oh gosh, she's doing this, she's doing that. Yeah, I mean, just that. And, it's just something new every day. It really is. Like, it's just something new every day. Good and bad. New habits they develop. And I'm like, where'd you learn that?
Isn't that funny? Yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah.
so funny. Yeah.
I know. I'm like, girl, me estás rezongando. I'm like, you can't even talk yet, and you're like talking back to me already. But yeah, everything is just it's a different thing every day. You learn something new every day. With your child, they learn probably something new about you every day too.
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. It's a journey. Yeah. So you already shared this, but just in general, is there kind of one tip of advice that you have for a Latina mommy?
Yeah, like I said, I guess, especially being like Latina, I guess, like more so like I said, like I didn't see many like Latino parents in the NICU. So at times, like a lot of people could feel like they're under somebody else to ask questions, like, or like even like I know I had like at least 2 patients recently who had preemie babies in the NICU. And I remember like they came in for like their 6-week postpartum appointments. And I remember like, okay, like I can connect with you now, type of thing. Like I've gone through this, and they both didn't speak English, So, I mean, I'm like, I gave her the number to like call, and, like the the hospital interpreters, I'm like, don't be afraid to call. They have an interpreter. Don't feel like you don't have the right to ask anything. Or like, oh my God, what if they're not going to understand what I have to say? Or like, what if they don't have an interpreter? I'm like, they always have an interpreter, whether it's in person, it's in phone, whatever the case may be. Like, that aspect, like, don't feel like you might be under, even if it's we're not, where I live, there's not many like Latino people, and even more so like in Whitewater, if you remember, like there really wasn't many people there, but yeah, don't be afraid to ask or feel like under anybody else. It actually, in the NICU, they had like the readathon type of thing. And I remember asking the NICU, I'm like, do you have any books in Spanish? And they're like, actually, we don't. She's like, I've never really had anybody ask us that question before. I think she was more surprised that I was asking for a book in Spanish, even though like we speak English, I was like, well, if you find any book in Spanish, like, can you give it to me, because, we would read to the baby and stuff like that. But she was kind of shocked that I asked for a book in Spanish. And she's like, she's like, I think I'm going to ask if we can get some books in Spanish, So, yeah, I was shocked that they didn't have any in Spanish. I'm like, there's Spanish speaking patients here,
Right.
But she's like, yeah, I don't think anybody has asked us that question before, or I don't know, it's like parents just felt like, oh, well, there's no book in Spanish. Well, I guess it's no book in Spanish.
Right. Or they were afraid to ask.
Yeah.
Because they didn't see any, Spanish books. Yeah. And look at you. You started this. So that's great.
So I do. Yeah. And she's like, I'm going to ask them if they can get us some Spanish books in here. And that's been one of my things, like one of my goals that I haven't met yet, but I do want to take them some books in Spanish there. I mean, because we've like, when was it? Might have been like was it around Christmas time last year? I don't remember, but they tell people like if anybody wants to donate to the NICU, they're more than welcome to. So we actually donated like, oh my God, like 30 or 50 gift cards that we donated to the NICU. I think it was around Christmas time that we did that. Nice. So I mean, it was like an open public thing. But like I said, I still want to take my Spanish books in there. I just haven't gotten the chance to do that. But yeah, we, every year they have anybody who wants to donate to the NICU can donate to the NICU.
Yeah, well, let me know. I'd be happy to donate some Spanish books, the ones that we've used with Dee, because, it's really helpful. And it's all about exposure también. It's, even though you're in a hospital setting, like it's also important to bring a little bit of cultura or a little bit of home, to that space. Yeah, that's great. It even gave me perspective that, yes, even though your childbirth, like your birthing experience wasn't what you hoped for or that you thought it would be, you're at least making an impact. You have made an impact, whether it be the gift cards or your brother, like your parents, giving food or blankets. También now with donating bilingual books, like had you not had this experience, you would just not think about other NICU parents. And that is so impactful.
Yeah.
So good for you.
Yeah. So gonna meet that goal, but I'm gonna do it.
No, and you will, and you're also still a new mom. You still have a little one, pero if that's something that you really want to do out of the goodness of your heart, I'm sure that you'll do it. And that will support you as well. Alrighty. So my last question is, what is your meaning of motherhood?
Oh gosh. I guess one thing that I kind of feel sometimes a little bit guilty about, is like, don't compare your kid with somebody else, And I feel like I do that all the time because I'm like, she's 15 months old, like she should be doing this, or she should be doing that. But, I always have to remind myself, like, she's 2.5 months, still a little behind, than most kids her age. That's one thing I have to learn how to like kind of stop doing a little bit. Like, I see other kids, kind of doing stuff and I'm like, oh, well, she should be doing that, and I'm like, okay, she was a preemie, and I'm gonna slow down, she'll get there when she can. But just learning with your child, I guess, having like, again, patience and just enjoying it. It's very easy to get very frustrated with them, but I guess learning how to like, like your parents are like, dame la. Like, you're like, I don't know how to do anything, I guess, but it's just, sometimes kids just need to get away from you and like they're, throwing a tantrum or whatever, they sometimes they just know how to make you push your buttons.
Yes.
But it's just learning what they want, enjoying it. Like I said, not comparing your kid with somebody else. And just loving it, I guess, mostly, like it's your child. You know, it's yours forever, regardless of what happens, and just enjoying the moment with it, like just learning from them, learning from you, and patience, and just more, I think more than anything is just try and enjoy it, whichever way, whatever situation is, just loving every moment, really.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that. It's definitely, yeah, we've said it's a journey, it's a learning experience. Yeah. And it's never ending. It's
I know.
one thing you think you mastered at something, but then they go to the next thing and it's another challenge. So yeah, the patience piece is definitely important.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Gisela, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate you sharing your story and, opening up about your experience as a NICU mom, having a preemie. She's beautiful. She's so cute. I haven't seen her in a while, so maybe we should. Yeah, troublemaker.
Troublemaker now. I look at her and I'm like, gosh, like I remember when she was like first in the incubator, I was like, oh my God, like you just don't ever think it's ever gonna like, even go home. Like I remember thinking like, when in the world are we gonna go home? Like super long days, and everything. But now I look at her and I'm like, oh my God, like she was just a tiny little thing, and now she's like running around everywhere,
Yeah, that's great. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Well, felicidades. I'm glad that things have gone well for you, even though, yes, there were a couple bumps in the road. I'm sure that this has even made you a stronger person, an individual. And again, even for me, even though I have not had this experience, I think it's helpful to know like parents who have had different experiences, porque it's always important to be mindful and kind of be prepared, right? If it were to happen, and knowing who to reach out to. So I'm glad that, you've been kind of vocal about it, and you've also been supporting other parents as well.
Yeah.
Because it takes a community and a village,
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And even like, sometimes you like feel embarrassed, like I said, to like ask for help for whatever it is. Well, I feel like you just get to the point where you're like, I need help, like just really don't be afraid to like ask family, ask friends for help, whatever you need, like I said, it was hard because I'm like, oh my God, like, you're asking for help. Let's like, you gotta do it, Don't be afraid to ask for help more than anything. Cause sometimes that's where, things could get even, worse, or, people fall into like postpartum depression, those kind of things, like, I mean, I never went through that, but it can be very easy, like I said, especially if like certain people don't have the help from family or even a significant other, whoever. So just kind of, always ask for help if you need it, type of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for being here again.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for tuning in to the Viva la Mami podcast. If you like this episode, make sure to leave a review and write what episode really resonated with you. If you really loved it, share it on social media or with an amiga. As always, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you are listening. Make sure to follow me at Viva la Mami on Instagram or visit vivalamami.com. Please note the information shared in this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be replaced by your healthcare provider nor taken as professional advice.